Hey guys, it's Gadi Schwartz, and we start tonight with RFK Jr., once presidential candidate, now President Trump's pick to, quote, make America healthy again, clarifying his stance on vaccines after contradictory comments in the past.
There's no vaccine that is, safe and effective. News reports have claimed that I'm anti-vaccine or anti-industry. I am neither. Vaccines play a critical role in healthcare. All of my kids are vaccinated.
RFK Jr. in the hot seat today, going at it with lawmakers over everything from abortion to vaccines. Our Vaughn Hilliard joins us in a minute with the rundown. And the flip-flop the president just pulled on federal aid. 24 hours ago, Trump froze a lot of federal funding, but today, a walk back? We're going to explain that. And the AI wars are getting even more wild. Today's battle is between OpenAI and DeepSeek, and who created what algorithm first. And if that wasn't confusing enough, Alibaba is now challenging everyone with an even newer AI. We've got full team coverage to break it all down, and those are just some of the stories we're following. There is a lot more to unpack tonight, so let's get going, because this is Stay Tuned Now. A fiery hearing today over on Capitol Hill, and in the hot seat, President Trump's pick to lead HHS, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And there were tense moments, not just between senators and Kennedy, but with protesters and supporters in the room. Here's just some of what went down.
News reports have claimed that I'm anti-vaccine or anti-industry. I am neither.
In your testimony today, in order to prove you're not anti-vax, you note that all your kids are vaccinated. But in a podcast in 2020, you said, and I quote, you would do anything, pay anything to go back in time and not vaccinate your kids. Mr. Kennedy, all of these things cannot be true.
Did you say Lyme disease is a highly likely militarily engineered bioweapon?
I probably did say that.
And with us now is NBC's Vaughn Hilliard. Vaughn, the hearing today seemed so much more tense than others that we've seen so far. Kennedy didn't seem to be backing down or taking anything quietly at all, right?
No, and the issue for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is that he's going to have to convince particularly Republican lawmakers that he is credible and that he is a man of his word, because what Democratic lawmakers, like those exchanges you just heard, tried to do was call into question whether RFK is simply making statements over the last several months out of political convenience for the purpose of getting confirmed, right? Vaccines is just one example. For decades, he has been a vaccine skeptic at best. But during the COVID pandemic, he was actively in 2021, his nonprofit petitioned the FDA to revoke the COVID vaccine from the market, from being accessible to Americans. And now up on Capitol Hill today, he was suggesting that, well, I won't actually take vaccines away from anybody that wants them. He was just questioning the science and wants to make sure that they're safe. But there was another line of questioning that came from Elizabeth Warren, the senator out of Massachusetts, that had to do with whether Kennedy was seeking to enrich himself. He has been a litigator. He's a lawyer himself. And I want to let you listen to this exchange because there's a current lawsuit that he has against a pharmaceutical company over a particular vaccine that is still in the courts. And if they were to win the case, he'd be slated to take in 10% of the earnings. Take a listen to this exchange.
For all of his talk about follow the science and his promise that he won't interfere with those of us who want to vaccinate his kids, the bottom line is the same. Kennedy can kill off access to vaccines and make millions of dollars while he does it. Kids might die, but Robert Kennedy can keep cashing in.
Senator, I support vaccines. I support the childhood schedule. I will do that. The only thing I want is good science, and that's it.
How about then say you won't make money off what you do as Secretary of HHS?
And as you saw there, he would not commit to, particularly after leaving office for a period of time, not taking in money from filing potential lawsuits against pharmaceutical companies. So there's a lot here for Mr. Kennedy. And the big question mark is whether there's enough votes to get that confirmation.
And yet online, when you watch a lot of those clips, the context from people on the right is, well, look at all these lawmakers that are taking in lobby money from pharmaceutical companies. Did that come up at all?
That is where, for Robert F. Kennedy Jr., he's attempted to use some of what he would suggest would be hypocrisy about his own efforts and those compared to lawmakers, and particularly because Mr. Kennedy was a longtime Democrat, of course, the son of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and the nephew of President John F. Kennedy. And he didn't switch political parties to independent and then didn't become supportive of Donald Trump just until this last year, and was even under consideration at one point in time to joining the Obama administration. I want to let you listen to a part of his remarks to the lawmakers today on this.
These Democrats are opposed to me for partisan issues. They used to be my friends, agreed with me on all the environmental issues that I've been working on for my whole career. Now they're against me because anything that President Trump does, any decision he makes, has to be lampooned, derided, discredited, marginalized, vilified.
Gadi, the one other quick issue that could really turn off some Republicans is abortion. He was a longtime proponent of reproductive rights, and he didn't become a defender of President Trump's position on restrictive abortion measures until literally just the last couple months. Again, one of those issues that Democrats were trying to point to Republicans as hey, you guys shouldn't trust this guy.
Yeah, and it'll be every Republican vote that counts on this one. Von Hilliard, thank you. And another notable moment came when Senator Tom Tillis point-blank asked RFK Jr. if he was a conspiracy theorist, and here's this exchange.
I got a real quick question for you. Are you a conspiracy theorist?
That is a pejorative, Senator, that's applied to me, mainly to keep me from asking difficult questions of powerful interests. I was told that I was a conspiracy theorist. That label was applied to me because I said that the vaccines, the COVID vaccine, didn't prevent transmission and it wouldn't prevent infection.
As you can see, these days there's nuance to everything. Let's bring in Phil Galewitz. He was in the room as Kennedy testified. He is a senior correspondent at KFF Health News. Phil, walk us through some of those moments. The protesters in the back when he was answering questions, there were cheers, there were claps. Did you hear what you expected to hear here?
Sure. It was a very heated hearing, and it was a crowded room, a couple hundred people in there. I'm going to guess about 2/3 of them were RFK Jr. supporters, and about 1/3 of them, I presume, from walking through the crowd, were opponents who did not want to see his nomination confirmed. And yeah, when there were a couple comments early during his testimony where he was asked about his views on vaccines, and as you mentioned, he has sort of backed off what had been written and said for years, and is saying that he has no issue with vaccines. A couple protesters raised their voice and got quickly thrown out by police.
And this whole confirmation, the left sees this as a referendum on accusations of him being a vaccine skeptic. The right seems to be cheering on him fighting back against the left. And yet there are some questions about his pro-choice, pro-life stance. What is he telegraphing about his stance on abortion, and how critical is that going to be for the actual vote?
Sure, I think abortion will be one of a couple issues that will come up. It was hard to read the tea leaves. Senators were asking him about his questions about his issues on mifepristone, the abortion that people take as a pill, the medication abortion. And he had sort of indicated that I want to look into the safety of it. And a couple senators raised questions that the issue had already been looked at and the science was already clear. So it's really an open-ended question on if he would change that, if he becomes secretary. But abortion is just going to be one of the issues. I think another key issue is just whether he is knowledgeable of the major health issues before him. He faced a lot of questions about Medicare and Medicaid, which are two of the largest programs under HHS, covering almost half of all Americans. And he had some troubles describing how both programs work. Phil Galewitz of KFF Health News, thanks so much for joining us.
Meanwhile, President Donald Trump is ordering the U.S. government and Navy to start getting Guantánamo Bay ready to hold up to 30,000 undocumented migrants swept up in these immigration raids. Take a quick listen.
So we're going to send them out to Guantánamo. This will double our capacity immediately, right? And that's a tough place to get out of. Today's signings bring us one step closer to eradicating the scourge of migrant crime in our communities once and for all.
That's just one of a host of announcements, executive orders, and even walkbacks coming from the White House today. Here's NBC's Garrett Hake with more.
Tonight, after rolling out hundreds of executive orders and actions in his first week, President Trump with a rare walkback. The Office of Management and Budget saying it has rescinded its controversial memo appearing to freeze federal funding for programs across the government. That Monday memo had paused, quote, grant, loan, or federal financial assistance programs that might run counter to the president's executive orders.
Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid have not been affected by any action we're taking in any way, shape, or form. We are merely looking at parts of the big bureaucracy where there has been tremendous waste and fraud and abuse.
The White House says the underlying orders freezing funding for DEI, climate, and other targeted programs are still in place, but all of it temporarily blocked by a federal judge.
Their explanations have created no clarity or certainty. There are a lot of programs they are saying won't be affected, when that is not what organizations across the country are experiencing.
And tonight, another sweeping order amid President Trump's escalating crackdown on illegal immigration nationwide. He announced the Departments of Defense and Homeland Security will begin prepping the Navy's Guantánamo Bay facility to hold detained migrants.
We have 30,000 beds in Guantánamo to detain the worst criminal illegal aliens threatening the American people.
The massive Navy base in Cuba still holds 15 terror detainees and has been used to temporarily house migrants before. What kind of civilian oversight would there be?
ICE has the highest detention standards in the industry. You can't find another state, federal, local, or city that has higher detention standards than ICE.
Let's bring in Garrett Hake at the White House. Garrett, I mean, that question you just asked really speaks to kind of the heart of the very long and controversial history of Gitmo, starting with the base not being in a state or a U.S. city, but rather on an island of a sovereign country, Cuba, that says it's an illegal occupation by the United States. So for oversight, the buck now stops with ICE totally on this?
Well, maybe, Gadi, and maybe not. I mean, later in the evening, we saw tweets from Pete Hegseth, the new defense secretary, suggesting that there might be a greater role for the Defense Department in managing this facility, because it is, of course, a naval base. I think it's totally unclear at this point exactly who's going to run this operation at Guantánamo Bay and how. And the big challenge, and what I was trying to get at with my question, is I don't think it becomes a lot more clear even after it's operational. This is not an easy place for journalists to visit. It's not an easy place for attorneys to go potentially visit clients who are in detention. And it's also a break with ICE policy, where they normally try to detain migrants close to where they are arrested, close to where their families might be. This island in Cuba is not close to anywhere they're going to be arresting people. So a huge break with traditional immigration policy here with ICE and the Department of Defense, and a lot more questions we're going to have answered that right now I don't think, candidly, anybody in this administration really knows the answers to.
Yeah, they're getting there by air or by sea. And then you've obviously got the history of torture, restricted access while it was used to house some of the most dangerous terrorists in the world. And Gitmo still holds some of those terrorists, as you mentioned in your piece. Like the name Gitmo alone probably strikes a lot of fear outside of the United States. Is that part of the point here?
Well, I don't think anyone will admit that out loud, Gadi, but I think it's probably at least a bonus for some people in the administration who want all of their actions this week to be part of sending a signal to migrants. If you're here in this country, they're going to come find you. If you're not here and thinking about coming, don't come. In illustrating this story, and we have a hard time even showing, there are different areas of this camp, the places where people are used to seeing, terrorist detainees on Guantánamo Bay is not necessarily the same place where these migrants will be held, certainly not at the same scale. It's just kind of a black box for us. And I think, to the degree that casts a pall of fear over people who might be thinking about violating immigration laws or might already be doing so, to at least some people, the more immigration hardliners in this administration, that's a feature, not a bug.
Yeah. And Garrett, meanwhile, last night we were talking to you about those quit and we'll pay you through September letters that had just gone out to like 2 million federal workers. What's the latest there?
You know, we heard from a lot of those federal workers today, many of whom told us they were insulted by the offer. They feel like this is a government that doesn't appreciate their service, wants them out. President Trump spoke to this a little bit today, saying he thinks this will make the government more efficient. But there was a lot of pushback, including from the Federal Workers Union today, which suggested that this is an effort to basically make a toxic workplace in the federal government, and from Democratic politicians who questioned whether Donald Trump has the legal authority to do this or even the ability to pay people out if they take this deferred resignation, as it's being called. So a lot of consternation and confusion, even from federal workers who might otherwise have been inclined to accept this opportunity to not work and still get paid between now and September.
Yeah, and also in all those flurries of memos, today we saw Trump walking back that federal aid freeze right as a judge granted something called an administrative stay in that. Is this a loss? Is this a tactical retreat? What's going to happen next?
Yeah, look, we're more than 24 hours in, and I don't know that this has gotten any less confusing, Gadi, but the White House hoped that by rescinding this memo, which they believe created a lot of confusion, they could go back to focusing on what was originally in the president's executive orders, targeting very specific programs for pauses or freezes in funding, things that have to do with DEI or climate policies or things that the president has more expressly opposed. But Democrats really jumped into the breach here today, saying that this doesn't change things, doesn't make things any more clear, and that they're going to continue fighting it. Here's Chuck Schumer, the leader of Senate Democrats, earlier today.
We believe they'll come back and try to do this in other ways. This has been their goal, to hurt. What they're basically doing is being lawless, to hurt families, to help their billionaire friends. And so they're going to keep at it. We're going to keep at it.
Gadi, the White House has made clear they don't think it's constitutional to be told that if Congress passes a bill to spend a certain amount of money, they have to spend it. That is the law of the land right now, but they want this court fight. So I don't think we've heard the last of this by any stretch.
Yeah, the inverse power of the purse. Crazy stuff. Garrett Hake at the White House for us tonight. Garrett, thank you. And right before Trump announced his plans to hold migrants at Guantánamo Bay, he signed the Laken-Riley Act into law. Now, that's going to allow undocumented migrants to be detained if they've been accused or charged with theft. That is the first major law of Trump's second term, and it comes as ICE raids continue across the country. But one raid planned for Aurora, Colorado tomorrow, well, that's now being postponed over, quote, media leaks. Meanwhile, the Trump administration is also revoking the temporary protected status for more than 600,000 Venezuelans in the United States. NBC's George Solis has more.
Tonight, President Trump signing the Laken-Riley Act into law.
We're moving with urgency and speed to get these vicious and violent criminals the hell out of our country.
The law requires the detention of undocumented immigrants accused of theft and violent crimes. It was named after Laken Riley, the nursing school student who was murdered last year in Athens, Georgia, by a Venezuelan migrant who entered the U.S. illegally and was released twice after being detained, according to ICE. It comes the same day the Trump administration has revoked temporary protected status for more than 600,000 Venezuelans in the United States, implemented by the Biden administration. Also, as ICE raids have been unfolding in major cities like Chicago and New York.
This is part of our plan to make sure that we're protecting America.
Newly confirmed DHS Secretary Kristi Noem announcing the decision Wednesday morning on Fox and Friends.
Before he left town, Mayorkas signed an order that said for 18 months they were going to extend this protection to people that are on temporary protected status, and we stopped that.
TPS is a federal program that allows people from certain countries to live and work in the U.S. when it's deemed unsafe to return to their home country. The Biden administration gave Venezuelans TPS in 2021 and 2023, citing the country's political and economic crisis under the Nicolas Maduro regime. The extension by Mayorkas would have allowed Venezuelans to stay in the U.S. until October 2026. Instead, they now have until April or September, depending on when they receive TPS.
You're scared?
Venezuelans we spoke with today say they feel like they're in limbo. This man telling us that for the everyday Venezuelan who just want to work and live a normal life, their biggest fear is being deported to the country they fled from.
Se cierra todas las puertas y ahora todo el mundo ha quedado.
Another woman saying she feels like the doors have closed for all Venezuelans and that many in her community don't know what to do now.
Well, my day started at 6:30 when my first client calling me that, it was pure hysteria.
Mirta Fadul is an immigration attorney in Miami, Florida. She says clients have been calling her in fear.
These are people that are here trying to make a living. They're not criminals. They're mainly professionals that are trying to contribute to this country.
She says clients have been calling to explore their options.
There's student visas, there are investor visas, there are talent visas. Just encouraging everyone, reach out to any legal help, see what options you have.
On Tuesday, Maduro announcing that he was open to receiving Venezuelan immigrants deported from the United States,
Queremos que vuelvan.
saying, "We want them to return so they can be happy here."
Sean felices aquí.
The Washington Post reporting on Wednesday that Edmundo Gonzalez, who the U.S. recognizes as Venezuela's president-elect, is warning Trump not to strike a deportation deal with Maduro, saying he would, quote, use returning Venezuelans to his political advantage.
George joins us now from Doral, Florida, a city that has one of the largest Venezuelan populations in the country. And George, sorry for the question here, but in all of this confusion, like let's say one of these people that had this temporary protected status, that had a work permit as of yesterday, and now it's been revoked, if they get stopped by ICE, can they be deported immediately?
Yeah, Gadi, the important thing here to remember, it's a bit of a convoluted answer. So Kristi Noem, the DHS secretary, basically has two deadlines to keep in mind. The rollbacks of this TPS basically impacts those that are in two groups, those in April and those in September of this year. So for those that are in April, the DHS secretary has two options. She can either choose to extend TPS on her own, which many believe she won't do, or she can absolutely do nothing, in which case those protections will automatically extend for 6 months. Now, many people, of course, aren't waiting to see what happens. So what you hear from attorneys, like the one you heard in our spot, is many are trying to find other avenues, whether it be applying for visas for students, for industry, anything that basically tries to help them stay in this country. Of course, the other hope that many experts believe is the other caveat in this is many are wondering if those Venezuelans under TPS will go ahead and voluntarily leave before any action is taken. The bottom line here is those in the know, those that are advocating for Venezuelans under TPS are saying, look, at this point, the best thing you can do is try to find some legal help, because bottom line, it does seem that these rollbacks are going to impact all of those 600,000 Venezuelans. Gadi.
So when the Trump administration and Christine, they said we stopped that, talking about the TPS protections, that doesn't apply to all 600,000?
So it does, and it will. But again, when you talk about the rollbacks that were extended by the Biden administration, those would have given an extension of TPS to all of those 600,000 Venezuelans. Again, what we're looking at now are those two deadlines here, April and September. Once that expires, that's when you can start seeing those deportations take place. It's a bit of a muddied water situation, but it's something that we're going to keep a close eye on something that advocates and immigration attorneys are also watching closely. Because keep in mind, Venezuelans aren't the only people that could potentially be impacted. You also have migrants from Haiti, Sudan, and El Salvador, which were all targeted during the first Trump administration. Now, they haven't been called out yet, but many expect that could also be something that's coming down the pipeline. Gadi?
George Solis, thank you. And here's some other headlines that we're watching tonight. Former New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez got 11 years behind bars today. He was convicted of helping foreign governments in exchange for gold bars and other bribes. Menendez pleaded not guilty and called the trial a witch hunt. The judge said Menendez could wait to June to begin serving his sentence so he can be there for his wife's trial, who's also accused of taking bribes. And Meta has agreed to pay $25 million to settle a lawsuit filed by President Trump. Now, back in 2021, the social media giant suspended Trump's accounts following the January 6th attack on the Capitol. The agreement includes $22 million going to a fund for Trump's presidential library. And there's talk now that lawyers for the Justice Department and New York City Mayor Eric Adams are talking about dropping the case against the mayor. Our sources are saying that Adams' teams have reached out and they're asking federal prosecutors to do just that. But right now, there is no indication that this will happen. And Massachusetts officials say bird flu is now widespread among birds in the state. It is suspected to have killed both wild and domestic birds in a number of towns there. People in and around Massachusetts are being asked to report if they see any sick or dead birds. And the Fed kept interest rates steady today, and that is following a series of cuts that started in September. The president did not like that decision, blasting it on social media, saying we wouldn't be in this situation if the Fed spent less time on DEI, gender ideology, and fake climate change. And don't go anywhere. We are just getting started. Up next, the AI wars are heating up. OpenAI claiming DeepSeek ripped them off. We're going to break down some of the similarities and some of the differences and all of the potential legal issues coming up. Stay tuned. Hey, welcome back. The AI wars are heating up, and we've got a full plate of updates tonight, including potentially a new top dog in that race. I know it is not DeepSeek. That was yesterday. An even bigger Chinese company, e-commerce giant Alibaba, says its newest model is even better. China just shooting for the moon here as we start the Lunar New Year. And also today, new U.S. copyright rules. The legal road is now paved for AI companies to defend themselves in court. But does China even play by those rules? We're going to get into all of that. But first, there's a new twist in the Chinese app everyone is talking about. DeepSeek's American competitors are now alleging that the Chinese may have stolen the tech. Brian Chung explains.
They look similar. AI chatbots that can help you chef up a recipe or write a cute poem. On the left, OpenAI's ChatGPT. On the right, Chinese app DeepSeek, sparking concerns that the U.S. may be lagging behind China in the AI race. AI leaders here in the U.S. now allege that China may have cheated, building a competitor by tapping data from a larger model like OpenAI's in a process called distilling.
There's substantial evidence that what DeepSeek did here is they distilled the knowledge out of OpenAI's model.
An OpenAI spokesperson saying, "We are aware of and reviewing indications that DeepSeek may have inappropriately distilled our models," adding they'll work with government officials to take aggressive, proactive countermeasures. Experts saying it's not clear if DeepSeek is really a copycat.
There is almost like a knee-jerk reaction when it comes to anything that China develops to think of it as potentially stolen. And that's something that we do need to take extremely seriously, especially in AI.
All while OpenAI faces a lawsuit from the New York Times over unauthorized use of its content for training. OpenAI saying the case is without merit because training is fair use. The president's pick for Commerce Secretary telling the Senate he wants to further tighten China's access to U.S. tech.
NVIDIA's chips, which they bought tons of, and they found their ways around it, drive their DeepSeek model. It's got to end.
NVIDIA saying it is ready to work with the administration. DeepSeek did not respond to NBC News' request for comment. The app remains the #1 free app in the U.S. Apple App Store. In second place, its American competitor, ChatGPT.
And Brian Chung joins us now. Brian, the irony here is like next level. And then online, I don't know if you've seen, but so many people pointing out that OpenAI isn't quite as open as this open source company. What's your take?
Yeah, well, look, when it comes to the open source nature of this, what's so unique about DeepSeek is that they're not really offering this in the U.S., but they're also offering the code open source, basically telling everyone, hey, you could take a look at the books, see inside, if you will, and you gauge and be the judge over whether or not this looks like a copycat rather, of OpenAI's software and their ChatGPT model. But it is kind of an interesting debate here when it comes to whether or not it's the pot calling the kettle black. And I do want to point out that the same issues that OpenAI are alleging against DeepSeek have been lobbed against OpenAI itself. You just heard it in that piece. The New York Times and publishers and other types of artists and authors have gone after OpenAI for what they say is unauthorized use of their material when it came to training the models. So it's kind of just like a derivative of everyone claiming that everybody else didn't have the fair use to train their models and build it up.
Right. And meanwhile, Alibaba, which is kind of like the Chinese version of Amazon, if I understand it right, like they've released their new AI model. That one's not open source, but they are saying that this outperforms DeepSeek, also OpenAI and ChatGPT. Like, are we going to look back at this and see it as the week that China took the lead in the AI race?
Well, I don't know if people will look specifically at the calendar and say this was the week that we lost. And in fact, experts that I've been hearing from are saying it's not even necessarily the case that the United States is necessarily losing to China just because there happen to be these two apps released in the same week. But as you point out, Alibaba is a major player in the tech space broadly. As you mentioned, they're basically the e-commerce equivalent of Amazon in China. So they, in the fact that they're releasing their own model is very significant when it comes to not just the fact that they're releasing it around the time that DeepSeek also came out in the United States, but the tests on this initial version of the model seem to suggest that it's as smart as the other ones too. Again, it's coming from Alibaba, so take of it what you will. But what is worth pointing out here is that the Alibaba model there is not available in the United States. You can't necessarily play around with it yet, so it won't be until we get to see it here in America where we can be the gauge and kind of test it ourselves.
Yeah, can't wait. Brian Chung, thank you. Let's bring in Angela Cinnandella for some legal perspective. Angela, asking for Brian there. Legally, what is the term for calling the kettle black here? Like, what kind of standing does OpenAI have when they're facing a bunch of lawsuits themselves over scraping copywritten data to train its own models here in the United States?
Yeah, so it's wild. Everything both of you said is exactly right, in that what OpenAI is now alleging that DeepSeek may be doing is exactly what the New York Times and other publishers have formally accused and alleged that OpenAI was doing. And if you look at the legal arguments, they're almost a mirror. So OpenAI is saying that DeepSeek may have violated their terms of service, which say that this distillation process of harvesting data is explicitly disallowed if it's in order to compete and create a competitive service, right? So key word here is competitor. Now, if you look at what the New York Times said in court just a couple weeks ago against OpenAI, it was that OpenAI harvested all of their data, right, all of their published material in order to create a substitution, a service. That's literally a competition, right, in order to replace them, almost put them out of business. So that is the legal linchpin, that if you are using this in order to basically kick out whatever originally created this, then that is a legal problem. And that is what OpenAI is both defending itself against and arguing against, which is a very difficult place to be in, Gadi.
I hate to ask this dumb question, but like, who are they arguing it against? Is DeepSeek seeing this and being like, well, we don't even have an office out there in the United States? Like, do they have any jurisdiction? Do they have to play by these copyright rules here in the United States?
No, that is a great question. So quite realistically, it is going to be almost impossible to bring any sort of legal action against DeepSeek. What they could do, though, is if they could locate who these actual users are who are allegedly violating their terms of service, they could ban them from not using it. But obviously, there's so many ways around it. But what is very interesting is that they are flagging OpenAI that this is their terms of service and this could be a violation, which is also a message, though, to U.S. companies, right? Anybody in the U.S. that if you are then trying to do to OpenAI what OpenAI may or may not have done to the New York Times, et cetera, that you could be a real target.
I mean, this is the tech, I don't know, equivalent of karma, maybe? And I know today, like, the U.S. Copyright Office has released this new AI guidance. Is it cut and dry? Like, what's your take on it? It seems very nebulous to me. And how is it going to impact the current court cases that OpenAI is facing from places like the New York Times?
Yeah, it's very nebulous. And quite honestly, a lot of copyright law is you need actual litigation and you need precedent and you need court cases to really determine and define where things end. So what the Copyright Office tried to do is determine to what extent humans can own copyright over AI-generated data. So it won't necessarily affect current litigation, which is about whether or not AI is taking over human copyright, but whether or not, for example, if you put in a prompt into AI and they spit out an answer, can you own that based off of your prompt? And what the Copyright Office said is, no, it really comes down to what level of human creativity and expression you've added to this. So long as AI has generated any content, if you add your own human flair and embellishment to it, then you could possibly own it. But again, as you noted, Gadi, this is extremely nebulous, and the courts are going to have to figure this out in the future.
Yeah, we just had that scroll. That is not Star Wars. That is like all of the open cases right now dealing with copyright and AI. Like, the only thing that's going to settle this for us, I think, Angela, is if Silicon Valley comes back on HBO. Who knows? Maybe we'll get an AI to write us the next season. Angela, thank you so much for joining us. And coming up, checking blood sugar levels without all of the poking and the prodding. We're going to explain ahead. Hey, welcome back. Taking you now to India, where dozens of people are dead after a stampede at the largest religious gathering in the world. Now, about 400 million people are expected to attend a 6-week festival there. But this incident is another reminder of the dark history of deadly stampedes in India. NBC's Megan Fitzgerald has more, and we do want to warn you, some of the images may be disturbing.
Tonight, a chaotic and deadly scene in northern India after a stampede broke out, killing at least 30 people and injuring 6 others. Millions of people gathered in Prayagraj, southeast of the capital New Delhi, for a Hindu festival, the largest religious gathering in the world. The faithful pushing towards the Triveni Sangam River for a holy bath. But that's when the horror unfolded. This woman, who asked not to be named, saying, "Suddenly there was a huge crowd and we got stuck. People started pushing aggressively and we fell." People desperately fleeing for their lives, climbing over barricades and through fences. This woman says, "People kept stepping on us. I am safe, but my mother has died." And for the dozens who were crushed by the crowd, their lifeless bodies were carried off by first responders, along with the injured, even up to 12 hours after the chaos unfolded. For those who managed to escape, the devastation and sadness quickly setting in. Local authorities are saying the situation is under control, but admitting there's still pressure from crowds as tens of millions make their pilgrimage to the river as part of Maha Kumbh, a 6-week Hindu festival that takes place every 12 years. Nearly 150 million have already attended the event, including dignitaries and celebrities like Coldplay's Chris Martin. Satellite images show the scale of this massive event. Today's devastating incident is sadly not uncommon in India. Just last year, more than 100 people were killed in a stampede in the northern part of the country. Thousands of people were inside a tent, listening to a religious leader when crowds started rushing towards the stage. The incident being called one of the deadliest in India's recent history. And in 2013, a collapsing bridge triggered a massive stampede which killed more than 100 people, mostly women and children. 2008 saw 2 deadly events. All of these tragedies happening at religious gatherings meant to bring peace, but too often ending in pain.
And our prayers are with them. Megan Fitzgerald, thank you. And before we head to break, let's take a quick look around the world. We're first turning to Australia, where police say they put a stop to a planned anti-Semitic attack. Officers say they found a camper van full of explosives near a synagogue outside of Sydney last week. They say there's no longer a threat, but they say there have been a number of anti-Semitic incidents in recent months. And it looks like Serbia's prime minister is taking one for the team after the country's president urged him to resign. It's all in an effort to calm weeks of protests that have spread through the country. The protests came after 15 people were killed when a concrete structure collapsed at a recently renovated train station back in November. The demonstrations have been mostly led by students. And a grim warning from the Vatican saying Catholics should beware of the shadow of evil in AI. Now, a document released by the church Tuesday says AI should have, quote, moral and ethical considerations. And some news from the UK. Princess Beatrice has given birth to baby number 2. Now, this happened last week, but Buckingham Palace made the announcement this morning. Both mom and dad and baby are doing just fine. And still ahead, an all-out search for an escaped inmate, how the North Carolina man was able to break out of his cell. That's coming up next. Hey, welcome back. A massive manhunt in North Carolina after an inmate escaped through the jail's vents. Now, authorities realized 37-year-old John Nye was missing on Sunday, and they think he had a lot of help getting out. NBC's Marissa Parra is following all this for us. Hey there, Marissa.
Gadi, it's an escape that almost seems straight out of a movie plot, but it's not. Here's what we're hearing from local police. The local sheriff's office posted this on their Facebook page, saying that he didn't act alone. With the help of his 2 cellmates, they, quote, removed a ceiling grating, entered a utility ceiling chase, which is the space in the building where wires are typically held, and exited the roof through a ventilation housing. They continue that those same cellmates then concealed his escape by stuffing a mattress to make it look like he was sleeping. Now, for geographical reference, this is in New Bern, North Carolina. That's about 2 hours southeast from Raleigh, right along the coast there. They do say, though, that he is considered dangerous, so please be aware. Remember, this is a man who was in detention for previous multiple charges, including attempted murder. And a couple of facts about him, physical details: 6 foot 2 inches, 190 pounds. And you see his mugshot there on your screen. He has 2 tattoos, one on his upper left arm with the letters JMN and a cross on his upper right arm. And those are important, Gadi, because we've seen before with previous inmates who have escaped how they change their hairstyles. So keep that in mind as well. But of course, call police if you think you do see him. And another important factoid, he was discovered missing 4 p.m. Sunday. That's what police said. They didn't elaborate how long they think he was actually been gone. So who knows exactly where he is right now, Gadi, but certainly a lot of people on alert in North Carolina as we speak.
Marissa, thank you. And here's some of the stories happening out west that we're following tonight. In Alaska, some incredible video of a U.S. Air Force pilot ejecting himself right before his fighter jet crashed on the base. Look at it tumbling down like a leaf almost. Now, the pilot was in the middle of a training exercise in his F-35 when he reported an in-flight malfunction. No word yet on what caused that plane to go down. And in Arizona, lawmakers are introducing legislation aimed at keeping the Diamondbacks in Phoenix at Chase Field. Now, the current lease is ending in 2027, and the team has turned down offers to extend it already. Lawmakers want to direct money into maintaining and renovating the ballpark. This push comes less than a year after the state's hockey team was sold and moved to Utah. And some positive news out of Mission Viejo, California. This good little girl wearing cone of shame right there. Oh, that's Daisy Duke, and she was rescued by a local animal rights group. Now, during her checkup, vets found a blockage in her heart, and they rushed her to a cardiologist, and she's now been given a pacemaker. Daisy Duke, she's feeling much better. She is recovering in foster care, and she is hoping to find a forever home soon. And before we go, it is time for the future of everything, making it easier than ever to monitor blood sugar levels, how continuous monitors are even helping people who aren't diabetic. That's coming up next in the future of health. And tonight's Future of Everything headlines are all about the future of money. Trump Media is branching out from Truth Social to launch Truth Fi. That is Fi for their financial services brand, and it includes Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. It's partnering with Charles Schwab to offer investments based on what they are calling America First principles. And this extension into the financial services industry could put Trump in direct competition with his buddy Elon Musk. That's because yesterday X announced a deal with Visa to add payment systems to their platform, kind of like a Venmo, but built into your X account. Now, Musk has said that he wants to create an all-in-one super app similar to China's WeChat. And tonight on The Future of Everything, we are asking the question, what if monitoring your blood sugar was as easy as checking your pulse? Well, that's exactly what Samsung is trying to do. And this week, the company said they are working on a non-invasive continuous glucose monitor as a new feature on their Galaxy watches. And that would be huge because blood sugar monitors are really picking up in popularity, and interestingly enough, not just for diabetics. NBC News medical fellow Dr. Akshay Sayal chatted with some folks to learn a little more.
Where are you going for sushi?
I'm going to Izakaya. Have you been there?
No. Do you ever notice people with those plastic circles on their arm? Does it hurt?
It doesn't hurt.
Well, those are glucose monitors that measure your blood sugar in real time, continuously.
It's actually really easy. There's an applicator that you take out and you basically just put it on your arm.
They're usually worn by people with diabetes, like Dr. Mike Natter, an endocrinologist at NYU Langone Health.
When I was diagnosed in 1994, would have to finger stick and get a static data point of blood sugar in that moment. I equate this to trying to fly an airplane with a blindfold on. And these continuous glucose monitors remove that blindfold.
Here's how it works. The sensor attaches to your arm, then connects to an app, where it constantly keeps you updated on your blood sugar, even showing you how things like diet, exercise, and sleep can affect it.
Monitoring my diet has really helped. Figuring out what foods affect your sleep and your mood, energy, It's really interesting.
For about a year now, the continuous glucose monitors have been available over the counter, and even longer in places like the UK.
Well, I think anything that helps someone get a little bit healthier is such an advantage.
where Claire Reach discovered its benefits back in 2021.
What I learnt pretty quickly is that for a kind of a food that I know is going to affect me quite a lot, maybe higher in carbohydrates or higher in sugars or something like that, then if I go for a walk afterwards or something, that does make me feel a lot better and stops me having a crash.
But for all its benefits, like having the potential to identify diabetes earlier, there are also some challenges. First off, it's not cheap, with the most popular brands costing upwards of $1,000 a year. And there could be an issue about how people may interpret the results.
At the end of the day, these devices were not necessarily designed and developed and calibrated for a normal population. And so there is some variance to these blood glucose readings. And that could obviously cause a lot of alarm and a lot of emotional distress.
In other words, sugar spikes, especially after eating, can be normal. And in the past, similar glucose monitors have had to be replaced because of bad readings.
It was like the only good healthy option.
Which got us thinking, for those who don't have diabetes but want to wear one, what number should we be concerned about?
Generally speaking, if the blood sugars remain above 180 for a period of time, that's hyperglycemia. That's something that I would be a little bit curious to want to look into more.
When you go tonight, you're going to see your sugar and it's going to be like 160.
I'm not going to have any rolls. I'm just going to have sashimi.
You got it all figured out.
I have it all figured out, yeah.
Sashimi. And Dr. Akshay Sayal joins us now. Doctor, I understand you've got one right here. I heard your curiosity whirling at the end of that. Have you tried one of these? I know you don't have diabetes, but did you throw one on?
So I don't have diabetes, Gadi, but Abbott, a company that makes one of the sensors, was kind enough to send us a demo unit. And you can sort of see, I have some pieces from the kit here. This is the applicator and the sensor, and you can see I actually dissected it in the NBC News operating room before coming on here, and you can see that sensor right there. So this, essentially you wear it on the back of your arm. You've probably seen your friends, with diabetes have one, and now they are available to anyone. Anyone who wants these can get one over the counter. I wore it for a little bit. I did find, you can see myself sort of putting it on there in my apartment. But, what I found was that there are some foods that I was reacting to, foods that you may think are healthy and they're causing your sugar to go a little bit higher than you'd like. So I do think it does have some use potential in that case for sure.
And this one right here, can I take a look at this?
Yeah.
So this, like right in the middle, I don't know if you can see this on the camera, but there's a little bit of a needle right here. Not a huge, I saw you wince. Probably wouldn't hurt that bad, but having this in your arm at all time. I know Samsung, we were talking about how they're looking at a non-invasive, that means no needle, right? Non-invasive?
That means no needle. I believe they're looking to do it with a smartwatch, meaning you have, a watch like this, something that can just at all moments of the day tell you what exactly your blood sugar is. That's really the holy grail for this. You talk about people who are pricking their fingers all day. If we could have a way to just make life easier, I think, that would be huge.
Yeah, and watch how much sugar we all eat.
I don't know if some of us want to know.
Yeah, exactly. Dr. Akshay Sayal, thanks so much for joining us.
Anytime.
And finally tonight, a look inside a rescue mission in the aftermath of the devastating Southern California wildfires, how some people are coming together to help save an endangered species. Take a look.
Through the ashes of the Palisades fire into Topanga Creek, an army of volunteers wading through murky water armed with nets and fishing poles that look a little more Ghostbusters than your everyday angler. But with those beeps come an electrical charge. It's the quickest way to mass evacuate the elusive little rainbow trout hiding under rocks. It's a mission where time is running out.
All of this fills up with debris and ash. What would happen to that population?
There's a very, very high chance that entire population would be wiped out.
Look at that one.
And these aren't just any rainbow trout. This is one of the few places in Southern California where what start as rainbow trout can morph into steelhead trout and swim out into the sea.
It can take them a little while to recover, so sometimes just give him a little help and then we'll just get the cover on there. He's going to be stressed and scared.
How do you describe the magic of the rainbow trout, the steelhead trout?
How to describe that magic? Just to say that nature has miracles that sometimes we get a chance to get a glimpse of and learn a little bit about. That is not a good look. There you go, baby.
I'm still trying to wrap my mind around a fish that can swim here in these creeks and then head out to the ocean and exist in seawater.
Yeah, it's a pretty incredible transformation. And it's really incredible species.
On this day, 271 endangered Southern California steelhead caught and taken to the protection of a nearby hatchery just in time, where they will wait out the rainy season that threatens to overwhelm their fragile habitat.
Not to oversimplify, but this is like a fish evacuation, right?
Yeah, hatcheries aren't a great environment for fish, but they're better than this right now, given the impact that these fires have had on this watershed. And so it's their best hope for survival.
For the fish that once numbered in the tens of thousands here, biologists estimate there are now only hundreds. And even though Mother Nature has given them the resilience needed to thrive in both river streams and the sea, when disaster strikes, there are teams like these always willing to lend a human hand.
It's incredible how resilient they are. You'll have like this little puddle of water and you'll find this huge fish just flourishing in it. It's really beautiful.
Big thanks to teams like that. That's going to do it for us tonight. I'm Gadi Schwartz. We'll see you here tomorrow. But until then, stay tuned now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.